And it is the artist Dons that was chosen as the artist to represent his country his country Latvia at Eurovision in 2024. He managed to convince both the juries and the televote to give them the highest scores possible. Second place went to Festulis with Kur, and Katrina Gupalo got third with the Cat Song. I just wanted to add that, just to add the Cat Song, because cats. Dons will sing his song Hollow in the second semi-final at Eurovision in May. Did you watch the show? What did you think of it? What do you think of the song?
So I've seen a few of the performances. That cat song, I hated it.
Yeah, me too, but it's fun.
Sure, it's catchy.
Fun!
Yes!
Go.
Oh god, if Matt was here right now, he would be abusing us so much.
Oh, I know.
I can't believe, honestly, the lawlessness that has descended in the 2 hours that he's been gone. Anyway, the cat song was annoying and terrible, but it was quite catchy. As for Dons, I think this was perhaps the most obvious winner about any selection. Like, from minute one, it felt like no one was really that interested in the selection because it seemed so sure that this was going to win. I actually think people are kind of underestimating it. I really like the song. I think it has a clear avenue this year that is away from a lot of what has been selected so far. For that reason, I think it's going to the final. I think it's going to do well with the juries and get a good result overall. I think there's a world in which all 3 Baltic countries are in the top 10 this year, which is extraordinary when you think about some of the recent records. I just think that it's important that they look again at the staging and try and make him interact with the camera a bit more. They have some time to work on this now, of course, but the vocal is perfect. They don't need to worry about that at all. He could perform this tomorrow at Eurovision without a problem.
Yeah.
You just need to sort of look at the building around that. How can you embellish this performance with the staging without taking away from it?
Yeah, I think you can see a professional at work when he's singing. Like the passion that he puts in the song really shines through as well. His vocals were really good. There was a bit of a disconnect, I agree, because he closes his eyes quite often. He does try to look at the camera so now and again, but if they really can work on that a lot better, I think it could be a very good ballad. Now, will a ballad be good enough to go to the grand final with televote only? That is always going to be a question. I do think if a ballad is good, it will always get through. Is this good enough, though? What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think it is good enough, firstly. And secondly, I think we have to avoid falling into the trap that people often fall into where it's like, oh, ballads don't get any televote.
Yeah.
There is a sort of inclination in recent years to be like, oh, only mad stuff gets televotes. Only up-tempo songs gets televotes, that kind of thing. It's just not true. In recent years, it has happened. For example, last year, like the televote went a certain way. That's fine for us to admit and say that, but that's because the kind of dual phenomena of Lorraine and Carrier was always going to eat it up, essentially. But there've been plenty of songs, ballads that have done very well with the televote. I mean, if you look at some of the recent winners in high places, things like Arcade, Voila, obviously Salvador Sobral. We shouldn't forget that the highest scoring song in Eurovision of all time is a ballad, where the guy just stood on a small stage and sung his song. So let's not underestimate ballads in the televote. Is this one good enough to get a big score? Probably not, but it's, I think, going to be in the sort of Alika Bridges position where it gets through fine, comes away maybe a little bruised in a tough semi-final, qualifies fine, gets a lot out of the juries in the final. As a result, gets a good result. That's where I see it going. I don't think it's going to be a massive televote score in the final, but it's going to do well enough, and it's going to have enough jury support that it'll do just fine.
I think it's also really good to point out that it's in the second semi-final, which most people have kind of seen as a little bit of a weaker one. And it's also in the second half of the semi-final, and that's always going to help you quite a bit. And ballads will do well, and it's not necessarily about just being the out there song. You just need to stand out, and this will stand out in a semi-final with the Netherlands, with other songs that was Finland in this as well? No, Estonia.
Oh, Estonia, that's what you're thinking of,
yeah. Norway, that kind of stuff. This song will also stand out in its own way because it is a ballad. It is really well sung, and the locals will also catch up on that. Like, if you see a professional at work, they'll just vote for it, and that's always going to happen. So I wouldn't worry necessarily about Latvia's shot at qualifying just because it is a ballot.
It's getting through. That's, I think there's been a bit of catastrophizing about this. It's getting through.
Yeah.
Stephen, you're saying it has no chance at top 10. Like I said, I don't think it's the probability. I think there's a possibility. I'm talking in terms of optimal cases of all three of those songs turning out really well at Eurovision. There is a clear case you can make for all of them getting in the top 10 at the moment, I would say. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. The chances of all three of them turning up and being amazing is quite small, but it could happen. And I think it's worth saying that there is enough potential in this to do that. We should remember we're months away from the contest. All we can really talk about at the moment is potential. We don't have most of the information yet. Most of the information we don't have until the week of. So who knows what's going to happen?
Staging changes a lot as well. Like we had the example before of Moldova being very underrated often in the odds, and then the staging in 2018 that was all of a sudden it jumped up from like 38th or so to like 9th, and that can just easily happen. We will see when we get all of the songs, of course, and then the stagings, because that will change a lot of things, I think. Are there any questions about Latvia? I've been scrolling through, but I didn't see anyone using at ESCUnited really. Besides this, from Lumeria. Hi guys, I think him and Slimane have a great advantage so far because they are the only two ballots at the moment. I'm not sure if the only two ballots.
Only two male ballads, I think, is probably
Yeah.
What I think there is something to this, but at the same time, we still have to assess the songs on their strengths. Neither Latvia nor France are going to win the jury vote. I think both of them will. I think France has more of a chance than Latvia does, but neither of them are looking, I would say, likely at the moment to get into the top 5. So there's more to come. I think you can look at it at this moment and reflect and say, well, for Luxembourg, Crick clearly would have been the better choice, because instead of entering into a crowded mid-tempo pop field, which is where Tally finds herself, you would have had a sort of Bond theme, slow female ballad, which it would currently be out on its own and have a much clearer window. Like, think about things like Tamara Tadevska for a really extreme example of when a sort of female ballad really shines. I think that kind of thing would have been maybe possible with Crick, with the right kind of work, with the right kind of revamp, right kind of staging. But again, I think we have to realize and remember, we only have half the songs. A lot of the remainder are internal selections. Yeah. So we could have ballad, there will be ballads to come. I think it might stay sort of ballad light this year, but there's going to be more of them. There will be more competition. So you could be right, but I think on balance, your point is going to be weakened over time, I would suspect.
I think usually the internal selections are more ballady in general than the ones that get chosen through a national final, because televote and stuff. I think mostly it's the ballads are usually from, the Netherlands was usually a ballad country, but we're not that anymore. Well, I say that, but it's only one song, and we still need to hear it. Joost Klein is not bringing a ballad. I am excited about that. Yeah. Oh, it's so wild that we're sending him. I'm very happy with that. What does Latvia have to do to its staging is what Galactic Damien is asking. You already said about some camera angles. Do you have anything more?
Yeah, he needs to be less wooden, because he's very wooden at the minute. I think part of it is deliberate. He's trying to give this sort of very like lonely vibe, but I'd like to see a little more emotion. It's difficult. I know he's a very experienced performer, so it may be that means his ability to adapt and be flexible is slightly less than somebody who's very new. But it needs to be less wooden. It needs to be more expressive and more engaging. We need more eye contact with the camera. We need to see a bit more emotion on his face. That would really elevate it for me. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we really need to work on the camera angles and the emotion, like you said. I think the fog really works, but it also really worked because the stage in Latvia was a bit smaller. So we really need to see when you upscale the staging, how that will work. I do think you need to have a bit of that haunted, sinister vibe going on. So fog would definitely be a good idea, but it also distances the singer a little bit more sometimes. Although sometimes it also makes it more intimate. Think about Portugal 2 years ago with keep forgetting a song name, Saudade Saudade, of course, which is a totally different song, but like fog really can help sometimes. I don't think you should use fireworks in this necessarily.
And no, I think probably not.
No.
Maybe some. I mean, even like some sparks would probably be too much. It would just
Yeah.
cheapen it. Sometimes
Yeah.
pyro makes it worse.